crush your enemies.
They drew first blood, not me.
See them driven before you.
Oh, my user.
And hear the lamentation of your women.
But I pity the fool.
Glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate.
Phone home.
They're here.
Oh, real light sleeper, child.
Welcome to Vintage Video, where we're rewatching the 80s so you don't have to. We'll be reviewing every major film release of the 1980s in chronological order, overanalyzing what you've seen and spoiling what you haven't. I'm Patrick O'Reilly.
I'm Jesse Bayless.
And I'm Richard Wells.
And today we're discussing Pandemonium, released April 2nd, 1982. It was written by Jaime Barton Klein and Richard Whitley, directed by Alfred Soule, and released by MGM/United Artists. Following his comparatively beloved horror film, Alice, Sweet Alice, director Alfred Soule was contracted by 20th Century Fox to direct follow-up horror titled Ghouls, but a few expensive horror flops in 1980, namely Terror Train, scared the studio out of the horror market, and the project was dropped. Fledgling Prodco, the movie company, sought out the freshly available director to helm a horror parody film, the first of a 4-picture deal, originally titled Thursday the 12th. But because Roger Corman had so quickly registered the title Saturday the 14th for his own fast-tracked horror parody release, the film switched to Pandemonium, which was easier to differentiate from Saturday the 14th, but retroactively easier to confuse with 1983's horror parody Hysterical. The cast is packed with many of LA's most famous groundlings, Phil Hartman, Paul Reubens, John Paragon, Lynn Marie Stewart, and Edie McClurg, all of whom went on to fairly successful careers of their own. On a reported budget of $5 million, it evidently didn't make a single million back. We start on a stormy sky with lightning bolts crashing down behind the opening credits. A full moon peeks out from behind the clouds and is quickly filled with the silhouette of a howling wolf. But as the camera tracks backward, we notice the silhouette is actually a shadow puppet from 2 hands in the shape of a howling wolf in the foreground wearing fingerless football gloves. The interlocking fingers forming the shadow puppet separate just in time to catch a football, and we see we are at a 1963 football game in the town of It Had to Be, Indiana. The local football team, It Had to Be You, scores a last-minute touchdown to win the national championship game. The star player, Blue Grange, played by Tab Hunter, is carried on the backs of his teammates. In the men's locker room, a student named Bambi, played by Azzara, wanders to Blue's locker and opens it, dumping an avalanche of trophies. She pulls out a jockstrap to cuddle with while declaring her unrequited love to Blue. She sneaks out of the locker room when she hears the team approaching. A sports reporter played by Phil Hartman asks Blue if he plans to go pro, and a coach played by Lenny Montana answers for him in the affirmative. But Blue's mom, played by Edie McClurg, interrupts to contradict him.
Well, of course he's going pro. He's the best.
No, he's not. He'd get hurt. He's not going to go near another football.
Oh, yeah? He's getting a football.
Put that down. He'll get hurt.
Blue looks so old here.
I mean, he is old.
I mean,
he's at least 45.
But they did nothing to sort of disguise and pretend that he's a high school student?
Right, and none of the characters who we see in the past or in the present of the film age at all.
Oh, wait, I guess he'd be in university because it had to be you, right?
Right. The 3 of them pose for a Sports Illustrated photographer, and someone smashes a champagne bottle over Mrs. Grange's head, knocking her out. Back on the field, Bambi, who possibly works as the team nurse, asks if she can join the cheerleaders on a trip to flirt with the team at a local malt shop, but they tell her the invite is for cheerleaders only. Each of the cheerleaders is carrying a huge vegetable prop from their halftime salute to vegetables routine. Elsewhere in the stadium, we jump to the killer's POV as he pushes through a pair of doors in his fingerless football gloves to yank open a cabinet labeled Danger, Javelins, even though there's only one javelin inside. The premise of a slasher killing victims with a javelin is later used in 1984's Fatal Games. As the cheerleaders march across the field in single file, the killer hurls the javelin and it navigates the corridors of the stadium on its way to the field, where the punchline is already made clear, and we see the cheerleaders in profile holding a vegetable between each girl. Together they are skewered, and we cut to hours later as detectives investigate the cheerleader shish kebab and roll them away on a huge stretcher.
I did enjoy this.
It's a great image.
There is not much in this movie that was worthwhile, but I do enjoy just the shish kebabbing of the cheerleaders with giant vegetables.
Phil Hartman's reporter character offers his theory on the case.
I don't know who could have possibly done such a thing.
This must be the act of a maniac.
Either that or a very large chef.
A spinning clock flies toward camera to initiate a time-spanning headline montage. Cheerleader slain in shish kebab murder. Hungarians questioned. Exploding pom-poms claim more cheerleaders. Search continues for missing feet. 5 cheerleaders killed at Elks Club. Cheerleader camp closes permanently. Cheerleader camp reopens. Many fear tragedy.
I don't get the Elks Club. There's no specific murder.
Yeah, there's no
there.
reference to that later.
And
no.
it's not like it's a pun or anything unless I'm missing
And we don't
something.
see any exploding pom-poms in the movie either.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a typo because the headline says pom-poms with an N. But it turns out that's actually how you spell it.
Yeah.
But people say pom-pom, and so pom-pom with M at the end is now accepted. It's technically synonymous now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We cut to the campus of the present, 1982, 19 years later. Bambi pulls up in a pickup truck with a decal that reads Bambi's Summer Bee Cheerleading Camp. She hasn't aged a day in the ensuing decades.
It's all that milk she's been bathing in.
There you go. The score for this moment is a jazzy instrumental version of It Had to Be You as a reference to the school's joke name. The banner for the camp is too long and dangles toward the ground on one side. Inside the building, Bambi is surprised by David Squiggy Lander as Pepe, the maintenance man. When she explains she's here to reopen the cheerleading camp, Pepe's mother, Salt, is summoned with a wolf howl and preceded by a wave of ominous fog to offer a warning against reopening the camp. Bambi turns to camera to explain she's aware of the tragic cheerleader camp history, and as she talks, the word exposition blinks on screen in front of her. We learn here that she transferred to Embraceable U and captained their cheerleading team for 4 years, but she's back to prove herself to It Had to Be You. She asks Salt and Pepe not to scare off her applicants with all the tragedies.
Can't we tell them the one about the mass murderer who escaped from the prison?
No.
Can we tell them about the psychopath who escaped from asylum?
No.
What about the waitress and the donkey?
Well, only if they're good.
We cut now to a bus station where Carroll Kane as Candy is buying a ticket to a camp. Now, this is where it really started to bother me that Bambi is being played by Candy, and then we have another character named Candy. Right. And then everyone else's name will rhyme with Candy, but Bambi's doesn't. They couldn't come up with a 7th name that rhymed with all the other names. Weird choices. Another title on screen labels Carroll Kane's Candy character, victim number 1. She's lectured by her ultra-religious mother, played by Eileen Brennan, and warned against leaving home to live a life of sin in a college town. The reference to De Palma's Carrie is made more explicit when Mom brings up Candy's dirty pillows.
Everyone will see your dirty pillows.
Those aren't dirty pillows, Mama. They're breasts.
Not those. Those are titties. Those are dirty pillows.
She grabs an actual filthy pillow in the hands of a crazed-looking homeless man played by Sidney Lassick, who gets my favorite line of the film.
Those aren't my dirty pillows, Mama. They're his dirty pillows.
They're not dirty pillows. They're breasts.
Butt out.
When she's heard enough of her mother's lecture, Candy's eyes glow red and she lifts Mom high in the air to tell her off before leaving for her bus. Now we cut to victim number 2 leaving home. Glenn, a bleach blonde Judge Reinhold, with parents played by Kay Ballard and Donald O'Connor. His mother warns him not to masturbate at camp because it will blind him. And just then, his dad is let out of the house by a seeing eye dog. Dad has a mug full of pencils, and Glenn agrees to buy one in exchange for his dad impersonating Ray Charles? I don't know what is happening here. When Glenn opens his suitcase to pack away the new pencil, 1,000 more spill out. It's all he has packed. Dad mentions his brother Jimmy, the black sheep of the family, and we cut to a sheep in human clothes. Unclear how this film managed to jam every single scene with worthwhile actors, but I can only assume that everyone thought this was like Airplane.
Right.
And that the edited movie would probably be funnier than just the scene they were in.
It's like Airplane just had random stuff on screen, so this will work too,
yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think, like you said, none of these people had big careers yet.
Well, I mean, Donald O'Connor and Kay Ballard were past their peak stuff.
Yeah,
it's just
Barton
interesting.
Later on. Yeah, like...
it's crazy that they talk to these people into showing up. We cut to victim number 3. A militarized paperboy fires the morning paper with a cannon through the front window of a suburban home. Inside, everyone speaks directly to camera as though their home life was a game show. Each member of the family is introduced to present a component of the family breakfast, ending with older daughter Mandy North, already adorned with a Miss Breakfast sash. She wins the crown, and Mom hands her roses and a giant tube of toothpaste.
I don't really understand this whole segment.
I don't either. It's just like a reality show, like pageant type thing going on, but...
I guess. Like, it just doesn't... I mean, I know it's just supposed to be silly, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No, not really.
Tell us, Mandy, how will you use your title to help end the world's hunger problem?
Well, I think that all hungry people should brush their teeth. You know, I brush my teeth up to 10 times a day, and it always seems that right after I brush, someone offers me some food. So if they brush their teeth, someone will offer them food too.
Oh, good answer, Mandy. I wish we had time to chat with Mandy about Russian Chinese détente, but Mandy must run, brush her teeth, floss, and go to cheerleaders camp. We'll be right back after this message about hemorrhoids.
Dad throws to a commercial, and we cut to victim number 4, Sandy, played by Debralee Scott, who walks up to a hot dog stand and asks directions to cheerleading camp before everyone panics and freaks out. It seems like this is the most direct parody of the first Friday the 13th because Sandy is dressed like Robbie Morgan's Annie character from the first film, who is urged away from the camp by the staff of a local diner. Also like Annie, she is offered a ride to camp, but this character is picky about the cars she'll get in.
Can I give you a ride?
Well, what kind of car do you drive?
63 Plymouth.
Forget it. I don't ride in anything earlier than a 78. I'll find my own way.
She turns down another ride offer before she starts handing out applications to a long line of stopped drivers.
I want 3 references and no relatives.
We cut away to victims 5 and 6, Andy and Randy, smoking pot and driving down the road. Randy is actually dating Sandy, victim number 4, and Andy asks when they plan on having sex. They also talk about how she's currently the head cheerleader at their rival high school, as though he might get in trouble for that. When Glenn arrives at the camp, he finds Mandy now wearing a Miss Hoosier sash, and they bond over their matching platinum blonde hair and pocket toothpaste.
Hey!
When Candy steps off the bus at camp, the driver and the other passengers laugh when they learn she's wasted money on a round-trip ticket, even though she'll surely die here.
You didn't buy a round-trip ticket, did you?
Yes, I did.
This and other parts of the film feel a lot to me like the Pee-wee universe, specifically when the tour group laughs at Pee-wee for thinking the Alamo has a basement.
Aren't we going to see the basement?
There's no basement at the Alamo.
I'm sure it's no coincidence that this film stars Paul Reubens, Phil Hartman, John Paragon, and Lynn Marie Stewart, who would all later collaborate on Pee-wee's Playhouse series and Big Adventure film. Candy sees Andy and Randy pull up to the school and hits it off with Andy right away. A presidential motorcade rolls up behind them, and it seems that President Reagan was ultimately chosen between all the drivers who offered Sandy a ride here. As she steps out, he offers her a handful of Jelly Bellies.
You forgot your candy.
Nancy may do it for jelly beans, but I don't.
Enchanted by her from across the parking lot, Randy claims he already knows exactly what to say to Sandy.
Hello, bitch.
Cram it, clown.
That actually got a laugh out of me.
That's pretty good.
Because I was for sure not expecting that.
Yeah. Bambi calls the squad to attention and orders a roll call, and we're reminded that their names all rhyme. Sort of.
Mandy.
Candy.
Candy.
Randy.
Andy. Glenn.
Glenn Dandy.
We cut to the local police station, and what I assume is a joke about the glut of Canadian actors playing cops in these low-budget horror movies.
That makes more sense. I had no idea why this guy was
yeah, if you weren't thinking of that, you'd be like, I don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I thought.
But they're overdoing the fact that he's Canadian. He's literally wearing a Royal Mountie uniform. He's on the back of a horse,
right?
At a desk
at a desk.
Yeah. At a desk and covered in Canadian flags.
Yeah, and stamping documents with a giant beaver.
Yeah, he has like a taxidermied beaver stamp.
I feel like this is a little too meta, especially for the audience that they're going after. I don't think anybody at the time thought about the fact that a bunch of these films were Canadian tax shelters with a bunch of Canadians in them.
I feel like that was the intention of the writers, but I agree with you that I don't think even savvy audience at the time would have picked up what this meant. As the camera backs up, we see he's actually sitting at a double-decker desk because he's currently on his horse. So the horse has a desk, and then he has a desk that's built up above it.
It's like the ultimate standing desk, but you're not actually having to stand?
It's pretty cool. Paul Reubens enters the office as a character named Driddle and walks past a wall calendar announcing today is Thursday, July 12th. Cooper randomly orders him to change his name, though.
Driddle, change your name.
It's now Johnson, sir.
Johnson?
Johnson!
Johnson walks around the office feather dusting things, including a wall of taxidermied heads, but one of the heads is a living Shriner with his head protruding through the wall in a wooden frame. Cooper phones the warden at the local prison, and we see Warden June, played by Eve Arden, tied to a chair in her office, but one of the rioting prisoners, played by John Jambi Paragon, thoughtfully gives her the phone. She informs Cooper that a prisoner named Jarrett killed a guard and escaped last night.
Is Jarrett the man who murdered his entire family with a hand drill?
That's right. Then varnished them and made a lovely set of bookshelves.
Despicable.
Yes, but very talented.
I'm assuming this is a Texas Chainsaw Massacre reference because so much of the furniture in the house was made out of dead people.
Maybe.
But they're saying that this guy can make like
really fancy
indiscernibly
stuff.
furniture out of human bodies. After the call, Cooper tells Johnson he and his horse Bob are headed out to the asylum, but they'll reconvene at the morgue later. We cut to Andy and Randy getting settled in their room. Andy seems worried he won't get laid this summer. Glenn stops by to say hi, and we see that he's cut himself shaving his palms and affixed little pieces of tissue to the cuts.
I also don't get this joke.
The joke is that supposedly when you masturbate, you get hairy palms, and so he has to shave his hands to cover up that he's getting hairy palms, because the joke of his character is that he masturbates too much.
I think I missed that.
His mom said not to do it or he'd go blind.
Okay.
And later on he does some things.
Is this like a common urban legend thing?
The palm thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
It's one of the things that they say.
What are the others? Now I'm curious.
I feel like there's definitely other things that people say happen when you masturbate too much.
Makes Jesus cry.
Is the blind thing based on a real thing that people say?
I mean, I definitely have heard you'll go blind.
Yeah. Okay. Pepe's mother, Salt, cleans and admires her reflection in a hallway mirror until it shatters. And then we cut to Indiana State Asylum. Multiple personalities, group rates available. Inside, we see a patient impersonating a chicken, played by David McCarran. Do you guys recall the last time we saw David McCarran impersonating a chicken in a mental asylum? It had other cast in common with this film, specifically a groundling. 2 groundlings at least.
Was it a Cheech and Chong movie?
It was.
Which one was it?
Which one do they go to? Casa del Wacko.
I don't remember.
Nice Dreams?
That's it.
Hey, I did it.
It's also possible that he reprises this impersonation next season for a film called Off the Wall, in which he's credited as Birdman, but that seems to be the third and final chicken-related role for David McCarran. His only other recognizable credits were for voicing Shredder in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1 and 2, Secret of the Ooze. That guy pretending to be a chicken is the voice of Shredder. A doctor reminds the chicken man he's actually a cat, so he meows and leaves. The doctor tells Cooper that a patient named Fletcher recently escaped. A patient in a Lady Godiva costume bodysuit finds Cooper's horse in the hall and starts flirting with it.
Wow. Hello there, good looking. Wow, Catherine the Great was right. You're hung like a human.
Out on the road, Jarrett, in fingerless gloves and played by Richard Romanus, flags down a ride from a truck stolen from the asylum with a decal that reads "Official Use, Maniacs Only" on the door. Fletcher is driving, also in fingerless gloves, so the escaped prisoner and the escaped mental patient head to the school together.
Where are you from? Prison. Really? I'm from the asylum.
No kidding.
In the gymnasium just before practice, Glenn and Mandy are flirting a bit, and he puts his hand on the name tag over her right breast to force himself to correctly recall her name. He holds it there for a while as he guesses wrong names, and even has to peek under his hand to eventually get it right. Then he grabs her other boob for a second round of trivia.
Let me guess what school you're from.
The joke being that it isn't printed on her shirt, so he's grabbing the boob for no reason.
I actually like this shirt.
Yeah, it's funny. As soon as the first cheer practice is underway, Pepe rolls through the gym with a tour group describing the heinous murders that have plagued this particular cheer camp for the last 20 years. Bambi tries to distract her class from his speech.
Take your pictures now of the doomed cheerleaders.
This might be your last chance, Tammy.
When the tour is gone, the students ask Bambi to confirm his story, but she tries and fails to downplay the danger.
Oh, you mean the dead cheerleader stories?
Yeah.
That was nothing. That was just a stupid legend. A silly myth that's been circulated in these parts for many years and strongly believed to be true by thousands. Let me rephrase that.
She reassures them they're in no danger. Cooper visits the morgue and is presented with the remains of the guard killed in the recent prison break. When she slides out the slab, in place of a body is a mahogany coffee table with a badge and cell key dangling from the edge of it. It's a pretty funny moment. At first I was like, wait, what is happening here? Oh, okay. They turn him into furniture. He's literally just a coffee table now.
It's Jarrett's work, all right.
Must have been hard to embalm. Did you use formaldehyde?
No. Furniture polish.
Cooper heads to the cheerleader camp to warn Bambi and her class, but he's quickly enamored with her student Candy, whose character is named after her for some reason. They launch into Indian Love Call from the 1924 musical Rosemarie.
When I'm calling you.
Do you guys recall the last time we saw this song sung by an actor dressed as a Royal Canadian Mountie?
Oh, man. I feel like I do.
Because the story takes place in the Canadian Rockies, the actual original play.
Actually, I was thinking of the one, Those Lips, Those Eyes.
That's it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he's performing it on stage, so he's wearing the same costume as the characters in this movie. Inspired by this duet, Glenn tries to force a musical number with Mandy. He dresses in a full tux and offers to catch her after a trampoline launch, but he distracts himself lighting a cigarette and forgets to catch her, so she breaks her ankle.
I like when Cooper comes in and introduces himself. I can't tell if it's intentionally a flubbed line.
He just kind of mumbles it.
Yeah, because he stumbles over his own name. He's like, I'm Sergeant Red Cooper of the Royal Canadians. But he does it again later.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if this was an actual stumbled line that they just kept, and they said, you need to do it again.
Yeah, say it that way every time.
It's really funny. But I rewound it and listened to it over because it's so funny because he seems genuine that he's having trouble saying
he's very
line.
flustered.
I'm Sergeant Reginald Cooper of the Royal Canadians.
Class is canceled for the day, and Glenn hangs out beside Mandy to apologize after everyone else has left. For some reason, he grips her injured ankle tight and starts cranking it around, aggravating the injury.
Ah! Ow! Ow!
Despite her mild cries of pain, he keeps twisting it until he climaxes in his pants and then leaves embarrassed. The rest of the squad head out to lunch at the House of Bad Pies, topped with a neon sign of a man vomiting. Customers are gripping their stomachs and retching as they're dragged out by EMTs when the kids walk in. Inside, a customer points to what he wants from the menu, so the waitress tears the picture out of the menu and drops it on his plate. Another man orders the Three Stooges pie, so she smashes it in his face. In a wider shot, we see there are two waitresses, twin blondes named Crystal and China. Hold on. I think I just realized another weird joke.
That they're named after dishes?
No, I think their names are literally Candy and Randy or something like that. We've seen these twins before.
Oh, like the actors' names?
Yeah.
That would be weird.
They do have other credits as twins before and after this. Their names are Candy and Randy. Wow, okay. I can't believe I remembered that. In a wider shot, we see there are two waitresses, twin blondes named Crystal and China, but ironically, the actresses' names are Candy and Randy, which are the names of two of the other campers that are here sitting at the bar with them. So there's two Candies in the cast and one Candy character in the story.
Do you think they hired them specifically because their names were Candy?
I have no idea why they hired anybody that they hired. Andy asks, what's the worst thing on the menu?
Do you have anything that's real bad?
There's Tuesday special.
What's so bad about that?
Today's Thursday.
I like that the consistency of it. It is actually Thursday. We saw a calendar earlier. Another customer orders the all-you-can-eat for $1, which seems like a good deal until you realize the hyphens don't end at the word eat. They end at the word dollar. So she puts the meal down and then picks it back up almost as soon as he's taken his first bite.
Okay, that's all you can eat for $1.
Glenn practices alone in the gym, hoping to make it up to Mandy, but someone in fingerless gloves is hiding here with him. The gloves grip the plunger of an explosive device, and when Glenn bounces off the trampoline for the second or third time, A corresponding explosion launches him through the gym window and up into the sky. We cut inside a passing passenger plane for Air Tokyo. A flight attendant, played by Lynn Marie Stewart in a kimono, is doing an offensive Japanese accent and welcoming the passengers to the flight. The other flight attendant is literally Godzilla in another kimono, handing out beverages.
Stewardess, my coffee is cold.
Godzilla breathes fire to heat the drink and blacken the customer's face and clothes. Outside the window, Glenn suddenly appears, screaming to the passengers inside for help. They just laugh and take photos. Somehow he continues floating higher into the sky and waves goodbye as he fades away. In her bed recovering, Mandy does a puppet show about tooth decay with a pair of stuffed animals, or stuffed teeth, I guess. At the end, she stands to brush her teeth, but the fingerless gloves emerge from behind the medicine cabinet over the sink, wielding a power tool with a toothbrush affixed to the end. The killer jams the tool in her mouth, and toothpaste foams out from around it. She falls backward to the bathroom floor, and toothpaste continues to foam out of her mouth, covering her entire face. But this is like an actual person laying there with something jammed in her mouth and a bunch of stuff flowing out of it. Like, it looked painful enough when she was getting killed with it standing up. But the fact that she's holding still as it continues to overflow out of her head. Warden June phones the police to report that Jarrett was spotted near Lover's Lane, so he heads there with Johnson. After she hangs up, the warden is led by prisoners into the gas chamber, which won't be filled with poison gas, but with the farts of a fat prisoner eating a giant bowl of beans in an adjacent outhouse chamber. We cut back to the school and we get a solid 3-minute Who's on First of the characters saying their own rhyming names back and forth. The only almost funny joke here is that at one point the camera stops on the wrong face and Randy has to point a thumb at Sandy to correct it.
No, Randy, don't give Andy Mandy's candy. Give him the candy that's handy.
All right, Sandy. So, Andy, what's your favorite candy? Mints.
I wish there was a candy that rhymed with candy to be the actual punchline that he was clearly avoiding by saying mints.
Yeah.
But mints is funny enough on its own that it's just like, that doesn't rhyme with the word that we keep saying. After the candy chat, they start a game of strip poker. We cut to Lover's Lane, which it turns out is also the local cemetery. Like, up until 5 p.m., it's a cemetery, and then after 5 p.m., it's Lover's Lane for this town.
I don't think it can stop being a cemetery.
No, they don't like have to exhume everybody every afternoon.
Day at 5 p.m.
But you only move the headstones.
You didn't move the bodies. Cooper and Johnson find Dr. Fuller outside the mausoleum. As they move through it, they recognize several pieces of furniture as Jarrett's former victims.
Hey, Sarge. This is Trixie, the waitress at the Kit Kat Club.
Right, Johnson. I recognize his legs anywhere.
Do you guys recall the last time we saw a Kit Kat Club for the podcast?
Oh, boy.
It bothered me because Kit Kat Club was spelt with 3 Ks. Do you have a guess?
Well, no, I was going to ask for a hint.
It was a 70s title. I think it was a club that had been opened in the town where the story takes place because a lot of new people were coming to town and it was changing the old-fashioned style of the town. So there were girly clubs and massage parlors opening up.
Can't think of the title of the movie, but I don't think it was a 70s title anyway, so.
Cold Turkey.
I never would have gotten that.
The town where everyone was trying to quit smoking for a cash prize. Somehow, the characters lose track of Dr. Fuller in the mausoleum as they're exploring.
I have to say, I really like the set design of this mausoleum.
It's cool.
With the statues with neon halos. And
yeah.
I was like, is that for the movie or
it
is
feels
that
like
real?
it must have been for something else that they like had a leftover set because it's really well done.
Yeah, it's like that looks that's kind of neat on its own.
I kind of want my mausoleum to look like this.
Yeah.
In a dark corner of the mausoleum, we find Jarrett has Fletcher tied down to a table saw and is preparing to turn the man into furniture. And at first, Fletcher is not interested.
I don't want people sitting on my face. Well, maybe a love seat would be nice.
When Cooper and Johnson have Jarrett cornered, they prepare to arrest him, but they're ambushed by Dr. Fuller, who it turns out is actually on Jarrett's team. The plan was to make a fortune selling Jarrett's victims to unsuspecting doctors in need of high-end furniture, though they claim never to have bothered killing any cheerleaders along the way. While Fuller is monologuing, Fletcher breaks free of his bindings and stabs Jarrett through his mechanical power saw arm, simultaneously electrocuting Jarrett, the doctor, and himself. I didn't realize until this shot that he had a mechanical arm. I feel like we could have focused on that more. When the smoke clears, all 3 villains are dead. Back at the campus, we see Bambi climbing into a bathtub full of milk and cookies, her secret of youth. Yet another killer appears in the bathroom with her, pressing his face into the curtains and stabbing blindly around her, piercing the book she's reading, and several boxes of milk staged on shelves behind her. An arm in fingerless gloves reaches through the curtain to steal Bambi's bag of cookies, and she is enraged. The killer grabs her by the legs and yanks her forward, submerging her head and eventually drowning her in the milk bath. An odd choice because Bambi was ostensibly the main character of the film for the last hour, and she's just been unceremoniously killed off with 20 minutes left in the story.
And she wasn't on the victims list.
Yeah. The game of strip poker is finally drawing to a close. The last surviving couples, Randy and Sandy, and Andy and Candy, pair off for the night. Sandy and Randy head down to a basement to have sex where they won't get caught. And back in the room, Candy uses her telekinesis to pull all the sheets off the bed. On the way to the basement, Sandy and Randy stumble upon the sex education room, which is just a big king-size bed surrounded with classroom desks and wallpapered with figures from the Kama Sutra. They climb into the bed, but before they get started, Randy hears a noise and leaves to investigate it.
Do you want me to come with you?
Sure, if we time it right.
That's a good joke. Randy has barely started hunting down the sound when the fingerless gloves wrap around his neck and drag him away. Lightning knocks out the building's power and Sandy gets worried in the dark. Back in Candy's room, she's finally lost her virginity to Andy and then shoves him out into the hall while he flirts poetically with her. When she's all alone, she realizes that she would have enjoyed herself more with someone she had a real connection with. A radio floats into frame, playing Indian Love Call again from her duet with Sergeant Cooper. When Andy gets back to his room, Randy is sitting up in a chair with a horse mask over his head, and when Andy pries it off, his friend has pale skin, wide eyes, and a pom-pom stuffed in his mouth. Andy screams and flails around the room, screaming over and over. Eventually, he falls back across his bed, and arms with fingerless gloves burst impossibly through the surface of his mattress to stuff another pom-pom in his mouth.
I feel like this was like a Nightmare on Elm Street thing.
But
right?
it's pre-Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah,
that was
I
84.
guess that's true. It's kind of like the Friday the 13th, like stabbing through the mattress.
That's
sorta.
true too. But I did feel like it's more of a Freddy Krueger move, even though that character doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Sometime later, Candy is reading The Three Little Pigs out loud when there's a knock at her door. She answers it to find Sandy impaled on a cheerleading megaphone. She falls to the floor dead, and Candy is officially the last survivor of the cheer squad. She makes a plan to call Sergeant Cooper to come save her, but the phone in the hall has a knife stabbed through it.
I was hoping for that, because as soon as she said it was dead, I was like, oh, I really want them to pull back and have it be murdered. And it was.
I wanted there to be blood dripping out of it, but the knife works. She slams the door shut behind her, and the fingerless gloves punch through it with a knife in one hand. I guess this is a Shining moment, the breaking open the door a little bit. Or it's a reference to Caddyshack when he does that with a golf club. Those movies came out at practically the same time.
But one of them is a horror movie, and this is a horror spoof movie.
Interesting theory. Cooper and Johnson are back at the police station having a fancy dinner to celebrate saving the day, but Cooper is still annoyed not to have solved the cheerleader killings. When Johnson suggests the killer might still be at the campus this very moment, Cooper is driven to take action. The killer chases Candy all over the school and corners her in the locker room, where he's revealed to be Tab Hunter as former high school fullback Blue Grange, dressed in a cheerleading outfit.
They play a bit of the Jaws score.
As he's approaching her?
Yeah, and it wasn't like a sound-alike.
No, it's the exact same thing.
The Jaws score.
Yeah. Turns out Blue Grange always wanted to be a cheerleader, but was forced to play football instead.
If I can't be a cheerleader, nobody can be a cheerleader.
Blue, is that my good knife?
Before he can kill Candy, the ghost of his mother appears over his shoulder, and the ghost of his coach appears on the other side to talk him out of killing. When the ghosts start fighting with each other, Candy uses the distraction to sneak away. She finds herself in the middle of the football field at the base of the bronze statue of Blue Grange, and eventually she looks up to see Blue is standing right beside the statue on the same platform.
But this is the LA Coliseum for sure.
Yes. She tricks Blue into believing he's in the middle of a football game, and as he runs across the field, she uses her telekinesis to lift the Blue Grange statue and chases the fullback with his own bronze likeness. Before he can make it to the end zone, Blue is crushed to death by the statue. Too late to save the day, Sergeant Cooper arrives to rescue her. He pulls her up onto Bob with him, and they sing their duet one last time. They ride off together under a neon sign that reads, "Candy loves Cooper." Each of the lead characters appears one more time on the billboard to remind us their names, and then we fade to black for the credits to roll. The end.
Yeah, it seems like a weird choice.
Well, I mean, in these movies, the cops always show up after it's too late to save the day.
No, I just meant rehashing who these characters are. Like they were doing it like their credit scenes, but they're
not putting the names on.
They're using the character's name and they're not putting the actor's name.
Yeah.
That's what makes it weird for sure. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they spent a lot of money on that neon billboard, so they had to keep using it. Pandemonium. It's not the best
but it's not
horror parody that we've covered so far. Which is, of course, Student Bodies, but it's very close to Student Bodies in terms of.
I have to say, like, I don't think there's a lot of like great things in this movie, but it didn't annoy the crap out of me. Like, Student Bodies was just obnoxious. This was like, yeah, that's kind of the obvious joke. It's slightly amusing. It's fine.
Here's what I think. I think that this movie was the most clearly aiming specifically at horror movies that we can recognize, because the other ones, like especially Saturday the 14th, does not parody any horror.
No.
It, like, none of the jokes have anything to do with horror films that had come out in the late 70s and early 80s. It's literally just like we have a vampire character. We have a Wolfman character. This one is calling out very specific recent horror films that were hits with audiences. And I feel like they're the most clearly aping the Abrams-Zucker school of make a joke out of everything, funny stuff's happening in the background. Yeah. It's very Airplane targeting. It seems like that's what they were going for. Is this is the horror version of Airplane. Right. And I think to a certain extent they pull it off better than I expected them to.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Yeah. Like I said, it's fine. It's like it's not annoying. It is, it's not as funny as a movie like Airplane, but they did a fine job. It's okay.
I think what's funny and what happened is that there were 3 teams of filmmakers that all decided at the same time, let's do a comedy because they're doing so many horror movies lately. Let's do a comedy that makes fun of all these horror movies, this big glut of slashers. And the first people to the punch were Student Bodies, which is incredible because it's better than Saturday the 14th. Student Bodies was the first one out there. It's actually smartly written. It's written by some old school TV actors that had comedy chops that like knew what they were doing. Roger Corman and his people with Saturday the 14th did not care. Right. They didn't care about horror. They didn't care about comedy. They just knew that there was a market for a horror comedy film and tried to plug something in, and that came out. This one I feel like is the one that got to gestate the longest and feels the most professional.
Well, I think it benefits from all these actors as well.
That's true, definitely.
Managed to get in. And I think they kind of lucked out that some of these folks ended up being as great as they were.
Right.
But, everyone did a really good job.
And I also kind of love the joke about all their names being the same, because that's the complaint with a bad slasher in general, is that the characters are so interchangeable and ridiculous. Yeah. But very specifically, do you recall a movie where we were bothered by the naming of the characters?
I do, but I can't remember what the movie was. So
I think it was Madman. I'm trying to check it right now. And I don't know for sure that this is what they were picking on, but I do feel like this is the first time where I feel like the writers of the horror parody were literally buying like 8 tickets to Friday the 13th on the same day and going in and watching it over and over again so that they could scribble down the details and like get the joke right.
But see, I think one of the things that benefited Airplane was that it was a direct parody of a direct movie.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So all they had to do was like their MST3K version of it.
Yeah. And I think maybe had this movie been a direct parody of something like Friday the 13th.
Right.
Then you could have focused the jokes a little bit better.
Right.
Rather than, it's like, oh, well, we got to have the cops, but we'll have them be a Mountie, and it's a cheerleading camp at a college that has no other students.
Right.
It's a summer camp.
Okay, so okay.
It's
during summer break.
Like Friday the 13th summer camp.
All right. See, I missed that already. I didn't know it was summer.
And the only clue that you get to that is that it literally says summer camp on the side of Bambi's truck when she first pulls up in 82.
I think one or two of the students say something like, to their parents, like, I'll see you at the end of summer.
Oh,
or
maybe.
They say something about it.
But so do you think this is intentional? The characters of Madman are as follows. Betsy, Teepee, Stacy, Ellie, Richie, Dippy, Tommy, Jimmy, Mary, Shirley, Jeannie. Like every single one of their names ends with E.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was probably in the mix of horror films that they decided that they were going to target specifically to look for tropes. Yeah. And that was when they decided on all these names are going to literally rhyme. That's how interchangeable they'll be. But yeah, I don't understand the other than just chronologically where they show up in the story, how they decided on the numbering of the victims, especially considering, like you pointed out, victim number 1 is not a victim because she's the final girl. She survives the film.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So I give this a thumbs up, actually, because it's funny enough that if I caught the beginning of this on TV, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to watch the rest of it.
Yeah, I'll give it a thumbs up. You could be the dissenting vote.
I know. I'm not gonna though. I'm gonna give it a thumbs up, but it's just barely.
I agree with that. Like it's merely mediocre.
Yeah. It's probably gonna end up pretty unreasonably high on my.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Well, we've watched a lot of bad movies.
What are we thinking Letterboxd for this one?
There's like one that I accidentally left up top that I'm really annoyed at. Like it just accidentally got.
Which one?
Splits.
Name names. What do we got?
Splits
is at the top?
No. I'm just saying it's just
too
high.
Okay.
I accidentally left it behind when stuff started going down, and
I think you need to rewatch it. It's actually pretty great.
No,
it's bad.
It's not. But it's accidentally stuck way up there. All right, so I actually have this at 22 out of 54. It is below Swamp Thing and above Vice Squad.
I have it at 29th, which puts it below Parasite, but above I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can.
All right. I have it in 25th, which is just under Missing and just above A Stranger is Watching. Our director here was Alfred Soule. Before this, he directed celebrated horror title Alice, Sweet Alice, and a Blue Lagoon ripoff starring Vanity called Tanya's Island, about a woman shipwrecked on an island with her abusive boyfriend and a Sasquatch character with whom she embarks on a physical relationship.
Oh my God, when did we get to this one?
It was 1980. We didn't do it because it didn't get a full theatrical release. But I did full notes for it, intending to do it as a minisode, and then I never recorded it. Pandemonium would mark Soule's final feature directorial credit, but he did transition to production design for television, with many, many credits on shows like Veronica Mars, Castle, and the MacGyver reboot. One of the writers, Jaime Barton Klein, this is his only theatrical feature credit, followed with a Treasure Island TV movie and direct-to-video title Annabelle's Wish. He also plays man number 1 in the restaurant. I think he's the guy who says,
I'll have this.
Before the waitress tears the photo out of the menu for him to eat. The other writer, Richard Whitley, previously wrote Rock and Roll High School, and after this it's mostly TV writing, including episodes of Roseanne, Millennium, Recess, the animated series, and Roswell. He's credited as man number 3 in Restaurant, which is the guy who orders the all-you-can-eat-for-$1 special. The music here came from Dana Kaproff. Before this, he scores Empire of the Ants and When a Stranger Calls. We've heard his work so far in The Big Red One, and he's back this season to score Death Valley. Cinematographer here was Michael Hugo. Before this, he lights the Monkees movie Head, The Spook Who Sat by the Door, and The Manitou. We've seen his work now in Gorp, The Mountain Men, and The Octagon. Later, he lit 126 Dynasties and 102 episodes of Melrose Place. The editor here, Eric Jenkins. Before this, he cut Heartbeat and Altered States. He's back this season for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, also starring Judge Reinhold and one of the Romanis brothers. And later, Ewok's Battle for Endor, and then mostly TV work on 27 episodes of Clueless, 5 Malcolm in the Middles, 31 Lizzie McGuires, 20 Phil of the Futures, and 34 Sykes. Tammy Alverson played 60s cheerleader. We saw her last as Sheila in The Idolmaker. Lynn Herring played another 60s cheerleader. These are part of the Shish Kebab team. Before this, she'd been in Roller Boogie, and after this, she did mostly television, including long soap opera runs, 75 Days of Our Lives, and probably her best-known role as Lucy Coe in 892 Port Charleses and 832 General Hospitals, a role she still plays today. Jan Speck played a 60s cheerleader. We saw her last as Brunette in Modern Problems, and later she has small roles in Short Circuit, Stakeouts 1 and 2, and Nick of Time.
It's funny that she has a role in Short Circuit, because I think Ali Sheedy's last name in that movie is Speck.
Oh, interesting. Sallee Young played a 60s cheerleader. We've seen her now as the lead in our mini-sode review of Demented, and then as Linda in Friendsgiving slasher Home Sweet Home. Candy Azzara played Bambi. Before this, she was in They Might Be Giants, and Who is Harry Kellerman, and Why is he saying those terrible things about me? We saw her last as Dom DeLuise's girlfriend Lydia in Fatso. Later, she had recurring roles on Who's the Boss and Caroline in the City. She also appears in Catch Me If You Can and Ocean's 12. Suzanne Kent played Crying Woman. Before this, we've seen her in the Gong Show movie, Nice Dreams, with a lot of this cast, and History of the World Part 1. I remember her mostly as Mrs. Renee from Pee-wee's Playhouse. Speaking of which, Phil Hartman played the sports reporter at the opening game. We've seen him now in Stunt Rock, the Gong Show movie, and Cheech and Chong's next movie. He plays another reporter in Tim Burton's 1985 film Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which Hartman also wrote. And later, he obviously makes a name for himself on SNL as various beloved Simpsons characters, The Three Amigos, So I Married an Axe Murderer, Jingle All the Way, and another long TV run on news radio. David L. Lander played Pepe. He's definitely best known for his work alongside Michael McKean, the Lenny to his Squiggy on Happy Days, and Laverne and Shirley. We've seen him now in Holy Moses and Used Cars. And like him and McKean were partners in that also. Like they just brought that Lenny and Squiggy energy to the film. He also voiced Smartass, the leader of the Weasels in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I didn't realize that was David Lander.
Oh yeah. I mean it's almost if you rewatch the movie, you can't unhear it.
That's great. Carol Kane played Candy. Before this, she was in Carnal Knowledge, Dog Day Afternoon, Annie Hall, and The Muppet Movie. We've seen her so far in The Last Detail. Later, she shows up on Taxi as Simca Gravis, wife of Andy Kaufman's Lotka Gravis. She's in Transylvania 65000, Ishtar, The Princess Bride, Scrooged, Addams Family Values. She took over the role of Madame Morrible for the first U.S. tour of Wicked, and more recently she had an amazing run as Lillian Kaustupper on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. She's also, even more recently, Pelia in Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Yeah.
Eileen Brennan played Candy's mom. Before this, she was Tess Skeffington in Murder by Death. We've seen her so far in Private Benjamin and The Sting. Later, she's in The Funny Farm. She's Mrs. Peacock in, is it The Funny Farm or Funny Farm?
I think it's just Funny Farm.
So there are two movies. There is Funny Farm with Chevy Chase, and there's The Funny Farm with Miles Chapman.
Which is the one, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Wait, Miles is in that too?
Yeah.
I was talking about Eileen Brennan.
You were yeah, Eileen Brennan
is in The Funny Farm.
Is in The Funny Farm, which Miles is the one from this movie, right?
Yeah, Miles is also in it. So the two of them are both in that.
Right. But it's The Funny Farm, which is not the Chevy Chase Funny Farm movie.
Okay.
When I was doing my notes, I kept thinking, I've seen this movie and it's the Chevy Chase one, and so that's funny that it's not, because that was definitely later in the 80s.
But it's so weird because there was The Funny Farm, which was 83, and then there's Funny Farm, which I think is
84?
88.
Oh, okay.
So, but like, there's also names in this, so like Howie Mandel is in The Funny Farm, the Eileen Brennan one, and like I'm like, this isn't.
That's funny because I just heard an interview with Miles Chapin talking about working on The Funny Farm and specifically mentioning having worked with Howie Mandel, because I think The Funny Farm is literally about a comedy club, and so he got to play a stand-up in that movie. But Funny Farm is literally about Chevy Chase and his wife moving to a farm in the country and not knowing how to handle a farm.
But I just don't know why you would name them so similarly when
just not enough titles.
Not a totally unknown movie came out a few years ago.
I feel like The Funny Farm is a totally unknown movie, even though it has some names in it. I feel like nobody ever talks about that one.
But I'm just saying, like, when you're in the 80s and you're like, oh, a movie came out a few years ago.
Well, I mean, we didn't just mention Running Scared for Judge Reinhold, which that was the second of 3 movies called Running Scared. Brennan played Mrs. Peacock in Clue. And amusingly, in 1989, she appeared as Judith in a film entitled It Had to Be You, which is a homophone of this film's university. Judge Reinhold played Glenn. We've seen him so far in Running Scared and Stripes. He's back later this season for Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and later still, he's in Gremlins. He's Detective Billy Rosewood in all 4 Beverly Hills Cop movies. He's the stepdad in the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies, and he plays actual judges with his own name in Kevin Smith's Clerks animated series and on Arrested Development. He's also the dad in some of the Beethoven movies. Bradley Lieberman played Chip Jr. He's back next season as Boy in Max Dugan Returns, and later Chipper in Sid and Nancy. I wonder if that's an intentional reference. Definitely not. But that he plays Chip Jr. and then Chipper. Teri Landrum played Mandy. We saw her last as Susie in The Devil and Max Devlin. I re-listened to our review of that. I have no idea which character she was, because she's not the mom of the kid, and she's not the woman that goes on to be a professional singer, so I don't know who Susie would be. This was her last feature film appearance. Debralee Scott played Sandy. We've seen her so far in Dirty Harry, American Graffiti, and she was in Earthquake, but the TV version that you guys didn't watch. She's the passenger on the plane that's like, "You're so obsessed with this Charlton Heston character. We're on our honeymoon. Stop talking about the earthquakes." After this, she's Violet Fackler in the Police Academy films, the first and the third one, but she's probably better known for her TV work as Kathy Shumway on Mary Hartman, and Forever Fernwood, and later Marie Falco on Angie. Alex Elias played Joe the Fry Cook. Later, she's Melvis in Munchies, and she reunites with Carol Kane in a couple episodes of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Ebby Rose Smith played Pete. That's the guy who's, I didn't mention him because I don't get the point of the joke, but he's wearing like a windsock hat at the diner.
Yeah.
How are things out at the airport, Pete?
Oh, didn't you hear, Joe? I quit being the windsock.
And why are you still wearing the hat?
What hat?
We've seen him so far in Brubaker, Resurrection, and I'm Dancing as Fast as I Can. Later, he's in Tapeheads, Fletch Lives, Turner and Hooch, and Falling Down, which he also wrote the screenplay for. Randy Bennett played Male Driver. He's back this season for Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and he voices the computer in Brave Little Toaster. Miles Chapin played Andy. Before this, he's in Hair, and we've seen him so far in The Fun House and Buddy Buddy. Later, he's in The Funny Farm, not Funny Farm, The Funny Farm, Howard the Duck, and Milos Forman films The People vs. Larry Flint and Man on the Moon. Mark McClure played Randy. Before this, he's in Freaky Friday, and he was Jimmy Olsen in the Christopher Reeve Superman films and Supergirl. I think he's the only person in all 5 of those, right?
Yeah, because I don't think there's any other character crossovers from Supergirl.
He's best known, if not for Jimmy Olsen, as Dave McFly, older brother of Marty McFly in the Back to the Future films. He's also in Apollo 13, That Thing You Do, the Freaky Friday remake, and more recently he shows up as Jerry in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Pat Ast played Bus Driver. Before this, she's in Midnight Cowboy, Foul Play, and we've seen her on the show in The Incredible Shrinking Woman and The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper. David Becker played President, presumably Reagan in the car there. This was his only film, probably because he didn't look or sound like President Reagan.
Well, which is odd, because if you look at the credits of the movie, they talk about celebrity lookalikes were provided by. And I don't know if that was a joke or if that was a real credit.
or they were just like trying to take the blame off of themselves.
Yeah.
They're like, look, someone told us that guy seemed like Reagan. Tom Smothers played Cooper. He was half with brother Dick Smothers of the famed comedy duo The Smothers Brothers. They parlayed a successful musical tour into the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. He stars in Get to Know Your Rabbit, and we've seen him previously in Serial as a reverend. Later, he's in Speed Zone, and he appears in a 2-part episode of Norm Macdonald's sitcom, The Norm Show, as Norm's dad. Tom Smothers played Norm's dad on Norm. Paul Rubens played Johnson. Before this, we've seen him in Midnight Madness, The Blues Brothers, Cheech and Chong's next movie, and Nice Dreams. Obviously, he stars as Pee-wee Herman in Pee-wee's Playhouse and 3 subsequent films, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Big Top Pee-wee, and Pee-wee's Big Holiday.
I feel like this is the first movie we've seen him actually kind of do Pee-wee-esque.
In Nice Dreams, he's literally wearing the whole Pee-wee outfit, and except for not the makeup, when he does stand up at the Comedy Store.
Okay.
Or is it the Improv? Maybe it's the Melrose Improv. I can't remember which club it was. He also shows up in Flight of the Navigator. He's a voice in the Star Tours ride, and he's in Moonwalker. He reunites with Big Adventure director Tim Burton as Penguin's father in Batman Returns, and he's the voice of Locke in Henry Selick's Nightmare Before Christmas. He's Amelin in the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer film, a boat salesman in Matilda, right?
Well,
You're saying he wasn't a boat salesman? He's the spleen in The Mystery Men. I met him briefly when he came to guest on Adult Swim's Tom Goes to the Mayor, but he was also Gerhardt, the crippled Habsburg-esque prince character in one of my favorite 30 Rocks ever.
That's so good.
He's also the voice of Jokey Smurf in the live-action Smurf trilogy, and he plays a second vampire character named after himself, Paul, in What We Do in the Shadows, but I haven't actually watched any of that show yet. I like the movie, though. John Paragon played Prisoner. We saw him last as a director in Cheech and Chong's next movie. He was a regular director of Pee-wee's Playhouse and appeared alongside the cast as Jambi, Pee-wee's personal genie character. Paragon is back this season as a flight attendant in Airplane 2. He shows up in the Pee-wee movies. He's in Spaceballs, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and probably my favorite appearance as Richard Fletcher, son of Kevin McCarthy's R.J. Fletcher, in Weird Al's incredible feature film UHF. He's Cedric in 3 Seinfeld episodes, and The Breather in 4 episodes of Elvira's movie Macabre. Don McLeod played male nurse. Before this, he plays the ape man that fucks Vanity in Tanya's Island, and we saw him last as T.C. Quist in The Howling. Next season, he's more gorillas in The Man with Two Brains and Trading Places. He's credited as Shadow, maybe Peter's Shadow in Hook. Who is Shadow? Is there a scene where he's screwing around and his shadow's doing different things?
Yeah, but it's just Shadow. It could have been anybody.
Well, it was Don McLeod,
Oh, there you go.
famous gorilla actor. David McCarran played Chicken Patient. We saw him first as Harry Hot Cash in Popeye, and as another chicken man in Cheech and Chong's Nice Dreams. He's also in They Call Me Bruce this season, and later Off the Wall, Runaway, Jaws 4 as a voice, Fatal Attraction, and later unspecified voices in Oliver and Company. Most famously, he voices Oroku Saki, aka Shredder, in the first 2 live-action Ninja Turtle movies. Other voice credits include Ghost Dad, Mr. Nanny, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, and Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Richard C. Adams played Shock Treatment Patient. Later, he's in The Sting 2, and much later, he's Santa in Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, Better Watch Out. Jim Boak, or Bach, played Fletcher. We've seen him now in Alligator, Under the Rainbow, and The Hangman in Pennies from Heaven. Later, he's an assistant football coach in Forrest Gump. Shirley Prestia played Morgue Attendant. She's in Hollywood Zap, that non-Porky's sequel that was marketed as a sequel to the European market. She was an original member of the Groundlings and worked mostly in television after this. Michael Tucci played Man Leaving Restaurant. He was Sonny in Grease. Candy and Randy Bro played Crystal and China. We've seen them both previously in Happy Hooker Goes Hollywood and our minisode review of Dr. Heckle and Mr. Hype. Later they appear in Chattanooga Choo Choo and episodes of Tales from the Crypt and Silk Stockings. Daniel Davies played Man Number 2 in Restaurant. Before this, he was in Rock and Roll High School, and we've seen him now in Hollywood Nights and Falling in Love Again. Lynn Marie Stewart played Stewardess. We've seen her so far in American Graffiti, Loose Shoes, and Last Married Couple in America, but she's best known to me and mine as Missy Vaughn from Pee-wee's Playhouse and assorted characters from all other Pee-wee films. She seems to have a lot of voice credits, doubling Shirley on Laverne and Shirley. I don't know if that was a situation where the actress was sick, and so she was like the regular stand-in voice.
Yeah, because she's got a couple of credits in that.
Like on multiple series that featured Shirley.
Mm-hmm.
Later, she's in Jumpin' Jack Flash, Summer School, The Running Man, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. She's Nurse Bean in The Secret World of Alex Mack. She's Maya Rudolph's mom in Bridesmaids, but she's likely best known to modern audiences as Bonnie Kelly, mother of Charlie Kelly, on Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Vern Rowe played Prisoner. He actually sings on the Life is Just a Bowl of Cherries track from the 30s that was featured in Pennies from Heaven last season. He passed away 6 months before this film hit theaters, but he was still only 60. It's not like he was an old man. Gary Allen played Dr. Fuller. He showed up in Alfred Soul's Alice, Sweet Alice, and Annie Hall before this. We've seen him in Don't Answer the Phone, All Night Long, Mommy Dearest, and Buddy Buddy. He's also Mr. Newberry in Fright Night Part 2. And Miles, I think, was also in Buddy Buddy, because I think Miles Chapin was the busboy that comes in and finds Jack Lemmon when he's trying to kill himself. Eve Arden played Warden June. Her credits go back to the 20s. She's in CoverGirl, which we decided was a prequel to Xanadu. She's in Mildred Pierce, Anatomy of a Murder. She's in current Patreon poll candidate, The Strongest Man in the World. She was Principal McGee in Grease, and we saw her last as the dementia-addled Duchess in Under the Rainbow, whose pet dog Strudel is being covertly replaced as often as it is accidentally killed. She reprises the principal role later this season for Grease 2. Kay Ballard played Glenn's mom. She was Coach Betsy in Freaky Friday. We saw her last as Elliot Gould's mom from the past in Falling in Love Again. She also voices Madame Agogo in the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Tab Hunter was Blue Grange. He has credits back to the 50s. We saw him last as Todd Tomorrow in Polyester. Later this season, he's back as Mr. Stewart in Grease 2, and he reunites with Divine for Paul Bartel's Lust in the Dust. Sidney Lassick played Man in Bus Station. Before this, he's Cheswick in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Mr. Fromm in Carrie, which is parodied by his short segment of the film. Later, he's in Happy Hooker Goes to Washington, Hot Stuff, 1941, and we've seen him on the show for The Unseen, Alligator, and History of the World Part 1. He's back this season in Partners, and later Rat Boy, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Shakes the Clown, and Sister Act 2. Edie McClurg played Blue's mom. She's also in Carrie, her first film. We've seen her now in Cheech and Chong's next movie and Oh God Book 2. Later this season, she's in The Secret of Nim, and later still, Mr. Mom, The Corsican Brothers, and probably her best-known role in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
They think he's a righteous dude.
She's in Back to School, Planes, Trains, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, the voice of Carlotta in The Little Mermaid, Natural Born Killers, A Bug's Life, Van Wilder, Cars 1 and 2, and her Oscar-winning role voicing Mrs. Butterworth in the 2012 masterpiece Food Fight. No, she did not get an Oscar for that. I'm mistaken. James McCrell played Mandy's dad. He shows up in Annie Hall and Semi-Tough before this. We've seen him in First Family, The Howling, and Harry's War. Later, he's in Gremlins, Teen Wolf, and Defending Your Life. Lenny Montana played Coach. He's best known for his first major role as Luca Brasi in The Godfather. Later, he's in the kangaroo boxing movie Matilda, Andy Sedaris' Seven, and The Jerk. We've seen him now in Defiance, Battle Creek Brawl, All the Marbles, and Evil Speak. His only remaining credit later this year is Blood Song, which somehow also credits him as the screenwriter, or a screenwriter.
Just an old-fashioned blood song.
I knew you couldn't resist. Donald O'Connor played Glenn's dad. His credits date back to the 30s. My first thought is always of Cosmo Brown and Singin' in the Rain, and specifically the Make 'em Laugh number. We just saw him last season as Evelyn's dance instructor in Ragtime. Later, he's Kenneth Zevo in Toys, and his last credit was as Jonathan Devereaux in Out to Sea, which I definitely saw in theaters opening weekend. I don't know why, but I could not miss a Lemon Mathau movie. Even as like a 7th grader, I was like, definitely seeing this opening day every time. Richard Romanus played Jarrett. Before this, he was in Mean Streets and Wizards. We've seen him so far in Heavy Metal, and later he's in a couple MacGyver episodes, first appearing alongside his actual brother Robert Romanus, who will appear as Mike Damone alongside Judge Reinhold later this season in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. By coincidence, he and Tom Smothers both passed away on the same day, December 26th, 2023, just over a year ago. Isabella Telezinski played Salt. She was Sister Isa in The Devils. Andrew J. Lederer played the Paperboy. He's back this season for Wacko, which is another horror parody extravaganza. And later, he's in This Is Spinal Tap. Manny Weltman played Bus Passenger. He's uncredited in Capricorn 1, The China Syndrome, The Devil and Max Devlin, and later this season in Grease 2, and later still Dr. Detroit and Ghostbusters. I think that's everything for Pandemonium. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, you can find all our socials at linktree/vintagevideopod. If you enjoy what we're doing, consider giving us a review on iTunes. I don't believe it helps visibility, but it's good for morale. And if you really like the show, maybe you should join our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/vintagevideopodcast for access to all our monthly 70s reviews and a hand in choosing next month's film. Patrons are currently choosing between Boss N-Word, The Flying Guillotine, The Four Musketeers, Milady's Revenge, Mahler, Report to the Commissioner, Shampoo, The Stepford Wives, The Strongest Man in the World, and WW and the Dixie Dance Kings for a 50th anniversary review next month. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join us next time when we'll be discussing Penitentiary 2, which IMDb describes like so. An ex-con, on parole and trying to straighten his life out, decides to resume his boxing career when one of his prison enemies escapes and kills his girlfriend. We leave you now with the trailer for Penitentiary 2. Cruise Control. No, that's not what it's called.
Penitentiary Harder.
his time in one penitentiary, now Too Sweet was doing all he could to stay out of Jamafanaka's Penitentiary 2. Too Sweet's back. He's bad, beautiful, and he's looking for action.
O2 will come through.
Same old Too Sweet. Boy, have I been waiting for you. Hey, I'm not boxing, man. My parole says I have to be in your employ for 1 year. It says nothing about boxing.
He made a deal to get out.
You want to be a wise guy?
But the man wants to change it.
Well, I've got employment for you.
Permanently.
I told you, the guards are. I see your point. Let's go and kill this sucker and get it over with. No, this one's mine.
I love you so much. I'll do anything for you.
While he was doing time, she was waiting.
A word. You do exactly what I say.
When the world hits you this hard, you hit back harder.
Go back to the penitentiary.
Now, Too Sweet's out for revenge. No matter what the cost. Jamafanaka's Penitentiary 2.